Welcome to the Courting Happiness podcast. This is a space where self-care becomes part of your day. A space where you learn evidence-based strategies to help your life, share it with those you love, and cultivate well-being at work. I'm your host, Dr. Kortni Alston. I'm a former news director, television reporter turned happiness scholar, TEDx speaker, and transformational trainer. I also understand hardships. While working my dream job in television, I lived a nightmare suddenly becoming a young widow after 86 days of marriage. I became committed to learning more about resilience, healing, and happiness. This is how I discovered my area of research, which is positive psychology. Now I'm living my calling of training individuals and organizations on happiness. And my new chapter begins with being happily engaged. The Courting and Courting Happiness is about a true courtship. I like to say commitment with happiness. The K in courting stands for the vulnerability of sharing my story, inspirational interviews with phenomenal people, the infusion of positive psychology, and so much more. You'll learn how to commit to your well-being one episode at a time. I hope you subscribe and share. So, are you ready? Let's get started. Welcome to episode 113. I'm Dr. Kortni Alston. Happy Thanksgiving weekend. I can't believe it that the holiday is here, and Ken and I celebrated Thanksgiving together yesterday. And instead of cooking, we made reservations. And I will admit something. I enjoyed every minute of it. We celebrated the holiday in this wonderful restaurant in South Carolina, Fort Mill, South Carolina. And I think this is like the first time that I've ever done that. I say that because I don't recall any time in my childhood doing it. My parents are retired caterers. My mother passed away in 2016, but together my parents had a catering business. But my dad is also, I mentioned him quite a few times on the podcast because he's also a retired vice principal. And so together my parents had a restaurant, and then they grew the restaurant to a catering business. So I was so accustomed for having these very elaborate Thanksgiving dinners. And they were were together, just incredible hosts, to the point where even years down the line, I remember reconnecting with a childhood friend of mine. We knew each other in, I think it was Montessori, kindergarten, first, second, and third grade. She can recall some of the past birthday parties that my parents hosted. And one of them was at my parents' restaurant. And they were just incredible hosts and what they would do for our home and what they would just do together. So I've been so accustomed to having, very elaborate Thanksgivings in my parents' home. And so this year, Ken and I did something very different. And normally he will cook, and I said, why don't we go to a restaurant? Yeah, my bonus son spent Thanksgiving with his girlfriend at their home, at her parents' home. And I said, why don't we go to a restaurant this year? And I thought, it's going to be okay. We'll go to a restaurant. It was fantastic. I mean, they had a beautiful Thanksgiving menu. There were so many other people out there doing the same thing, which is why I guess it's good to make reservations, right? So we certainly weren't alone. The spirit was so great. The people, in terms of their personalities and just kindness and the holiday spirit, it was just so beautiful. I looked at Ken, I go, we might need to make this a thing. It kind of felt like date night. And so it was really phenomenal. They even had the best vegan and vegetarian options and a traditional Thanksgiving meal just for Ken. So it was perfect. The name of the restaurant is called Napa. And they have a location in South Carolina, and they have another location in Charlotte. The Charlotte location was completely booked. So we traveled to Fort Mill, South Carolina, which wasn't a far trip at all. And it was just wonderful. We sat there on this, enclosed patio in the back that was heated, and looking at the water and just having a wonderful Thanksgiving. It was so beautiful. Um, and it was also truly meaningful because it was about Ken, Ken and I spending time together and the importance and the value of simply spending time. And he has been so busy at work that it feels good to really have had it all that taken care of. And I'm really grateful um that we had that moment, had that time together. And it's pretty timely, right? Talking about gratitude, one of my favorite things. I talk about it, I don't know, probably every other podcast, if not every podcast. I either allude or bring in gratitude somewhere throughout the podcast. It's part of my daily. It's also part of my character strengths. In positive psychology, we have this VIA, values in action, character strengths, and um, my top character strengths. One of them is gratitude, and I always love leaning on that character strength too. So, giving thanks can make you happier. That's according to the Harvard Health Publishing. They actually published an article on their website and that speaks to that, titled that, matter of fact, giving thanks can make you happier. And they provide the research behind it. And what I love about the article, and really that it speaks to gratitude far beyond the Thanksgiving table. It shares a study about the power of gratitude at work as well. And so it mentions how managers who remember to say thank you to people who work for them may find that those employees feel motivated to work harder. And they talked about some researchers out of Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania and how they conducted the survey in terms of randomly dividing university fundraisers into two groups. One group made calls to solicit alumni donations in the same way that they've always had done it. The second group were assigned to work on it in a different way. So they received actually a pep talk from the director of annual giving, who told the fundraisers this: she was grateful for their efforts. They also mentioned during the following week, the university employees who heard her message of gratitude, you ready for this, made 50% more fundraising calls than those who did not. Now that is something to be thankful and really, truly grateful for. There's so much value. I love being able to express gratitude. And I often discuss this, that it's a ripple effect. Gratitude can create for those who express it and those who receive it. And the article gives so many different ways to cultivate gratitude. It talks about writing a thank you note and how you may actually can make yourself happier and nurture your relationships with another person by writing a thank you note or an email, showcasing your enjoyment or appreciation of a person's impact in your life. They say you could send it, or better yet, deliver it and read it to the person if possible, and make a habit of sending at least one gratitude letter a month. And once in a while, they mention this: write one to yourself. I love that idea. I will say, when I'm writing a thank you note, I love to do it when I'm writing one that's going to be mailed, right? I love to actually have a handwritten note. And it's funny because sometimes I go, okay, I want to make sure my penmanship is very nice and neat. But to me, there's so much value in the handwritten note too. And I think also, I feel this is just my opinion, but I feel there's also so much value in it because we live in a day and age where, we maybe not traditionally do it so often because we are so accustomed to emailing or sending a text, which I also think is a great way to express gratitude, right? So I think it's wonderful to email. And actually, I love texting my friends and letting them know how grateful I am for them. And so I love that. The power of writing a thank you note. Here's another one. They say, thank someone mentally. They say, no time to write that, or no time to write. It may help you just to think about someone who has done something nice for you. and mentally thank the individual. So that's interesting dynamic in terms of mentally thanking someone. They also talk about keeping a gratitude journal and making it a habit of writing down or sharing with a loved one about, all the gifts that you receive for them and how you're so grateful for them. And so I love the idea of a journal. I often talk about, I have a gratitude jar. So I love my jar. And because it allows me to see all of my blessings or things that I'm grateful for, just continue to grow. So I love that. They talk about keep a gratitude journal is another. They also say count your blessings. So they say pick a time every week to sit down and write about your blessings and reflecting on what went right and what you're grateful for. I love this because it's all about thinking about what went well, right? Providing those positive reflections and what you're grateful for. And they also mention this. Sometimes it helps to pick a number, such as 3 or to 5 things that you will identify each week. And as you write or specifically think about the sensations you feel or you felt when something good happened to you. I love this because in positive psychology, it's all about savoring. Allows you to reflect on some of those positive emotions, experience those positive emotions, and savor the moment by discussing it. And so I really treasure that they're talking about counting your blessings. There's also great research in regards to gratitude as it relates to sleep, helping to improve our sleep. So when I'm conducting training sessions and sharing evidence-based strategies to individuals and organizations, and particularly as relates to workplace well-being, I often talk about the value of counting blessings at night, thinking about powering down from your day and reflecting on what went well, what you're grateful for. So another that they mention is pray. And they say people who are religious can use prayer to cultivate gratitude. And they mention people who are religious, but I think, prayer can be on so many different levels in terms of, yes, religious and spiritual and whatever that looks like for you, right? So they mention prayer, which I think is so fantastic. I will tell you that one of the things I love about my friends is that sometimes we'll send each other texts and we'll say, I need some prayer today. And it's wonderful to not only pray for your friend or a family member, and I consider my friends family, but it's also wonderful to know that someone is praying for you too. So I love that in terms of they mentioned the power of prayer. And last but not least, they talk about meditate. And they mention how mindfulness meditation involves focusing on the present moment. And this is the part I really like, without judgment. Although people often focus on one word or a phrase, and they mention an example of, such as peace, they also share it's possible to focus on what you're grateful for, the warmth of the sun, a pleasant sound, etc. It's interesting because I shared this in a previous podcast episode, but it might have been a few weeks ago. I walked into class. I could tell that my students were stressed. And I decided, hey, let's practice a mindfulness exercise. So kept the lights off and had them close their eyes. And we just sat in silence for about 3 minutes. Then at the 3-minute mark, I began talking them in terms of slowly awakening from the state. And one of the things I mentioned was gratitude. I said, what are you grateful for? And if you can't think of anything right now that you're grateful for, maybe you're just grateful for the fact that we are sitting in silence at this very moment. And it's so interesting because after I did that, so many students said, Dr. Alston, this was great. We should do this again. And one of the things that I'm really grateful for is being so present to understand where they were, to meet them where they are. And seeing like they're stressed out. And I'm like, you know what? I'm stressed out too, a little bit. I'm like, yeah. It's one thing I've learned about working in higher education or in education in general, but my background is mostly it's been only in higher education. I was a former television reporter and news director. So my work was mostly in journalism. And when I made the transition into higher ed, I noticed how stressful, like certain parts of the semester can be, like the very beginning when you're starting, midway when there's time for midterms, and then at the end when it's time to close out, right? And so it's interesting to see how it can look like not just for students, but for faculty and staff and administration. And so I was really grateful that I took that moment to be present as relates to their needs, and then also realize it was also good for mine as well. So one of the things I love, as I mentioned, gratitude creates a ripple effect. So I want to ask you this question. What ripple effect will you create today, tomorrow, or even in your daily life? What are you grateful for? I sent Ken a text the other day expressing gratitude. And I mentioned to him how much I love him and how grateful that we were spending Thanksgiving together. And I will admit that gratitude is something, as I mentioned to you, that I normally participate in. Even today, I sent gratitude texts to friends. But this text to him a couple of days ago comes 24 hours after some news that actually made national news here in the United States. So in Charlotte, which is where Ken and I live in the Charlotte area, and in Charlotte, one of our local stations there in mourning, and to be honest with you, all of the stations in the market are mourning. WBTV is a CBS affiliate station here in Charlotte, and their meteorologist, Jason Myers, and their pilot, Chip Tayak, were killed in a helicopter crash a few days ago, early Tuesday afternoon. The crash happened near an interstate in the city of Charlotte, and WBTV issued the following statement following the crash. And I would like to share it with you. Quote, "The BTV family is grieving a terrible loss. Our news helicopter, Sky 3, crashed midday Tuesday with two of our colleagues on board. Meteorologist Jason Myers and pilot Chip Tayak lost their lives. We were working to comfort their families in this difficult time. We appreciate the outpouring of support for our staff and your continued prayers for their families." My thoughts and prayers have been with their family, friends, and the news family at WBTV ever since this happened. And for those who may not know, my fiance Ken is a television reporter in Charlotte. So when I found out, he's a television reporter, I should say, for the competing station, WSOC TV. And so when I found out, I called him to make sure he was okay. And when I saw him, when he came home, I will admit this, I hugged him a little tighter. Plus, as a person who has experienced many losses in my life, from my late husband to a parent, I lost my late husband when I was 25 years old, working as a television reporter in Philadelphia. His death made local and national news. And I spent so much time thinking about, and still do, all the members of their family, their wives and children. So my text to Ken, I thought about their families. So in a post on Facebook on my profile page, I wrote about how life isn't promised, but our actions are important. They're so important. They can create a ripple effect, which is when I talked about the power of my favorite thing, which is gratitude. So I hope this episode empowers you to hold onto your loved ones a little tighter. I hope it inspires you to send a text of gratitude. I hope it also sparks positive emotions in your life and those you love. And I also want you to know that I am so grateful for you. I am so grateful for your support and supporting this podcast. I'm so grateful for every download. I'm grateful for every email. I'm grateful for every share. I'm grateful for it when it comes to you sharing your stories with me. And I am so grateful to those who listen to the podcast and invite me to share my expertise and research to help provide evidence-based strategies to train your organization on workplace well-being. Remember that your well-being is your most important job, and I'm always here to help. Guys, have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for listening. Let's continue this conversation online. Email us at podcast@drkortnialston.com. That's podcast@drkortnialston.com. Join us on Instagram at Courting Happiness. Don't forget, that's courting with a K. Also, I hope you join our private Facebook community. You can find us at Courting Happiness Podcast Community. Our private Facebook group is a safe haven to share, meet more people looking to build positive relationships, focus on well-being, and create a happier life. Now, are you ready to spread happiness? We hope you subscribe and share this podcast with your family, friends, coworkers, and all the important people in your world. We release a new episode every Thursday. Congratulations on your continued commitment to your courting happiness journey. Thank you so much for listening. We want you to be well, be happier, and be kinder to yourself. We can't wait to see you next week.